Well, I don't talk very loud, so and there might be a couple of points of data on here that if you guys want to move up, feel free. So you can see it better. I won't make it any bigger, so if you got to see something, just move on up. Well, yeah, my name's Aaron Elison. I have been with Redmond Minerals I've been an employee for going on 18 years and got my start actually selling our industrial stuff when I was in Colorado around Denver. So Redmond salt's also used for a high performance highway de-icer out there. So did that for 6 or 7 years. That was my period of time that I was not in agriculture. And then I obviously know the Redmond guys, and they said, "Hey, do you know anything about agriculture?" And I said, "Yeah, let's talk." And so that's how I kind of got here. My trail went like this. I grew up in Idaho on a little farm. We actually milked cows, 100 or 200 cows, farmed alfalfa and a couple of things like that. I took off into beef production because I knew I didn't want to milk cows all my life. That was a little too crazy. So got into that stuff, ended up finishing a master's course at Utah State University, and then spent a few years in production. If any of you know Montana, I spent a few years at the Winnicook Ranch, so historic Winnicook over there in Harlowton area. And spent some time between that and some dairy stuff that the company had that I worked with. And anyway, that's the trail that led me to Redmond, and so that's where I've been for all the time since. So I don't have any horses or cows anymore. I renovated my barn and I let people use it now. So we herd people through our barn instead of animals these days. But it's so fun to be associated with the agriculture community. So what we're going to do today, I guess first of all, how many of you already use some Redmond stuff? So most. And is everyone kind of beef cattle in one fashion or another? Whether it's yearlings or cow-calf. And then everybody's probably farming as well. At least some. Well, okay. Well, that'll help. Then just ask as we go along. What I'm going to share with you today is a couple of the angles of philosophy that we start with, and then get into some of the points about how Redmond works with some of those things. And so the way I want to start with is you guys, I've been around enough farmers and ranchers. You guys are smart. You guys really don't need PhDs telling you what to do all the time. And what we're going to talk about is a couple of philosophies of just that. You guys already know that you can't go contrary to nature very far for very long, or she'll turn around and snap you back into place pretty fast. So the concepts that we espouse are kind of related to that. So to kick that thought off, I was one day scrolling around and I found he was a human doctor, but a Dr. Campbell from Cornell. He's emeritus status, and so he's been out kind of on the health trail. Came across some of his stuff, and in fact, maybe I'll show you a couple of pieces of it. But when it comes to, actually before I talk to him, we're going to have a quiz about this after. So I want you to tell me about all those mineral interactions and percentages and how they relate to everything else. Before I get into Dr. Campbell, if any of you have been, or are you still a little confused about minerals and how you know how much you're supposed to have and when to have which ones, and I'm telling you, the world has not made it easy. By the time we're done today, I will have failed if I don't make this to where you can go home with 100% confidence and you can figure it out yourself. I'm serious. You don't need a PhD to tell you how to do your minerals. It's not that complicated. If you do it the way our Creator made it to be done. So Dr. Campbell, he's talking about nutrients. When they go into the body, this first statement, an amount of nutrient consumed is not the amount functioning in the infinite complex journey through the body. What he means is you take in so much calcium, for example, what you think you're taking, or you're feeding a cow, or whatever it is, that isn't necessarily doing what you think it's going to do. Because there are so many complex systems, just like that last graph showed. It is highly complex. There's nothing simple about human biology, animal biology, soil biology. It is complicated. And so he said what happens in the world that he comes from is we use drugs. He says we figure out the pathway, we figure out the pathway that a disease takes or whatever it takes, and that's where we intervene and we hit a drug and stop it there. But he said the medical world does not talk about health. We talk about targeted drug effects. So his whole thing is, the truth is, folks, if you talk about whole food context, and you guys probably know as well as I do, but like when I get on the road like this, if I don't eat well, or you think, man, you can have a granola bar or something, it's not the same. You guys know that. It's different when you eat whole, real food, and that has an entirely different effect. You can get away with some of that other stuff for a while, but we all know that if you did that for 10 years, 15 years, Mother Nature's going to reach around and slap you back into shape. You know, it just works that way. So what we talk about today, don't forget this concept. We're talking about giving nature what nature knows how to deal with. We're talking about this whole food concept. We're not going to talk about human nutrition today, but it's that whole concept of using things that nature knows what to do with. So, this is an example. You guys probably know of, you might have even had children that struggled with baby formula or whatever. There's just, this is better than this all day long. 6 ways from Sunday, it just is. Same thing over here when you're talking about what do you put on a field? How do you treat your soil? What do you do with it? Nature knows what to do with this stuff. No matter how you dissect mama's milk and try to recreate it, it's just not the same. Anybody ever had an experience with that where you just couldn't? We had one of our kids that really struggled with formula, and we actually ended up just putting him on good old cow's milk raw, you know, and it was like flipping a switch. Just good old raw milk. You've probably heard that too. People say that a lot about goat milk or something. But just that whole concept right there, you just can't recreate it like nature did it. So, if ever you have the chance to come to Utah, let us know and we'll be happy to show you around. This is kind of inside of one of the Redmond salt mine tunnels. Your Redmond conditioner is volcanic clay, and that's still just open pit mined stuff out there. Why do I talk about whole food context? Because those two products right there, the way nature made them, are not the same. All of the research, all of the things that we've all grown up with, the salt we eat, anything that goes into a cow diet is all refined salt. And even though it's 99 versus 93% sodium chloride, like Redmond is, those traces make a difference. The way those minerals interact makes a difference. I mean, when you look at this, and we can't even explain it all. No one can explain it all. The thing that I like about one of our guys that normally would be here today, he's been taking some classes at Kansas State. He said, I really appreciate, and I do too, whenever I would have a professor that would say, we really don't have a handle on all this. And the NRC book still only talks about a dozen of them. Does that mean there are more than a dozen on this wheel? Does that mean the others aren't important? I mean, we study that stuff. We continue to study that stuff, mankind and science. But the blend, the balance, and the proportion of those minerals is different. I'm just telling you it is. I'm going to show you some stuff as to why that's the case here in a minute. Here's another concept of kind of a whole food context. This, back to what, I gotta highlight one statement here. we don't get too hung up on individual nutrients. The other thing is, by the time I'm done today, hopefully it's not like, because we had one guy in a deal one time, he's a big soil guy. We got done with this presentation, he's like, what about magnesium? And I'm like, what about it? We don't get hung up on the individual nutrients so much because of what we're talking about. So when it comes to this whole food context, that balance and proportion of those minerals is a big deal. And an example of why we just don't, I used to think, okay, this wasn't that many years ago, when it came to like my lawn or something. Well, if I need a little nitrogen, potassium, a little NPK, why should I mess around? Why don't I go with like a 30, 20, 20 or whatever, right? Because then I'm getting a lot of it for the money. My thinking has totally flopped on that, because when I started trying that program, that was the worst it ever looked. It's the worst it ever did. So when you leave the balance and proportion there the way nature built it, things work differently. This just came, this is new, 5-year study from University of Illinois. All that nitrogen we're throwing in the dirt, maybe a fifth of it is even doing what we think it should be doing. Nature can't handle that much of one element at a given time like that. Doesn't know what to do with it. It's like this. It's kind of like mama's milk. Formula versus mama's milk. Mama's milk, the body knows what to do. So it's leaching out, it's going down the river, wherever it's going. But this is them. This isn't me saying it, this is them. You're only getting about a fifth. Most of it comes from the atmosphere. And you guys know well enough because you farmed. You do certain things and you increase that rate from the atmosphere if you're doing things in the soil right. So just an example, just an easy example of where more doesn't mean it's going to be better or even good. When it comes to the soil, we've been studying stuff, before I have you start focusing on that data. We've been hearing forever since I got here all those years ago that this stuff has done really good stuff when you put it in the soil. So we've tested it. I started testing it up in Idaho. We've tested it all over the place. We've been using a research institution for the last 5 or 6 years to study soil applications of Redmond products. We have done Redmond salt alone, we've done Redmond conditioner alone, we've combined them. And when we talk about SR, by the way, SR is the combination of Redmond salt and conditioner. So we have a 50-50 blend that we call SR50, for example. The number is just the percentage of conditioner in the mix. We've tested that, we've tested against NP and K, we've tested all kinds of application rates. We've even used a couple of companies who hang their hat on the biological approach and full spectrum minerals and not just nitrogen or whatever, phosphorus. So when we've done that, one of the things that we tested is, first of all, the bacteria, basically the soil life. After about the 3rd year, we finally decided we ought to measure the life of the soil. So essentially, the bacteria and the protozoa started to come alive where the Redmond went. This tells me that farm, as good as it might be, for probably years, there's been nothing in there. You don't have any of this stuff working for you. And it's cool to watch this change, because when I first moved out there to Utah, where I reside now near the mine, when Utah State came down and did a presentation one time about soil stuff, somebody asked about this. And that many years ago, all the guy said was, well, when Grandma said, come in out of the dirt and wash your hands, she meant to. There's a lot of stuff in there. Now they come and they're teaching pretty much all this and very little NP and K anymore. So it's kind of cool to see that corner having been made by the industry. So we're waking up the biology when we do this. And by the way, everything we're talking about in soil or animals today, the soil and the rumen are the same thing. The same thing's going on. So we're waking up the bugs. Nitrogen potential. How many of you know the Redmond label? Is there any nitrogen or protein in Redmond? There's not. How does this happen? In ruminant nutrition world, we call that microbial protein. when you start getting bugs going and breeding, reproducing and doing their thing and carry nutrients around, and when they die and keep going, you're creating nitrogen. That's why sometimes people will throw worm castings in their garden or whatever. So these bugs, when they come to life, are starting to add to a bigger picture and they're creating nitrogen potential. So when you start doing things right with the biology, things start to work in your favor, and not all of it always goes by what the book says. So that's pretty cool. Something else we've done, over the first 4 years that we studied, these numbers here are just the average points in the difference between what we've treated and all the studies that we did, the different treatments. So for example, in the first year, the difference in total digestible nutrients, this is relative feed value. I'm assuming most of you probably know that. But the increase over, and again, all these treatments we've done, this is just a summary. I'm showing you the trend of what happened. Every year we get an increase in total digestible nutrients and relative feed value points. This fourth year right here, we finally chose a company who are ironically one of our distributors, but they have a very expensive, very complicated program, and we use their program and we put it up against Redmond. And when you do research, we always do one, because we want to know where the edge of the cliff is if we can find it. And so we'll even do just straight Redmond, and we did it against their program, and then we had mixed some of theirs with Redmond, and we've done all that stuff. And even with their program, we get increases. So I'm here to tell you, one of your take-home notes is, whenever we have put Redmond products in the soil, the feed quality always goes up. And I'm not sweeping research under the rug here, like so many do. I'm telling you, in every test we've done, Redmond makes the feed quality go up. So for anybody feeding your own feed to your critters, you already know what happens when your feed quality is better. So that's 4 years worth of that. Another thing that we did a couple of years ago was test the toxins in the soil. So we applied dry SR50, and then this is an Alltech thing. They didn't know they were testing for us when they did it, but we have a ruminant nutritionist back in Ohio that got them to do this for us. So we had 4 different farms that put this on. We had the control where we didn't use any SR, and we put the SR50 on, and we compared the two in the feed quality as far as the toxins go. 8 times the reduction in toxins, 4 times of the fusaric varieties. Risk equivalent is just the overall big picture of the capacity for toxins to affect you and damage the crops. These are numbers I hate to even put up there because you just don't usually get that kind of stuff in research. So it doesn't only happen in a cow's belly, but it happens in the soil. The reduction in the toxin load on that stuff. So if you're making your own silage and feeding it to your cattle, that's another thing we have found in increasing feed quality is, so all these things compound. You're reducing toxin load on the crops in the ground. You're increasing the biology in the soil, which increases the way things move, and it makes the feed quality higher. So every time we do this, this is the trend of the results that we get. This picture, this is a farmer that has become a dealer for Redmond lately. And he had to point this out to me because I wasn't looking for it. I didn't even know when I went to his place. This is over in Ohio. But he said, I want you to take a look at that field, and I want you to look right there. And look at the difference between this and that. What do you see? He said, this was my test plot last year. That was where I wanted to see if what you were saying was worth anything or if you're full of crap. So he said, I put SR50 right there. And after I worked it this spring, this was last spring, he said the decomposition of corn stubble was so much better over here, you can't even see the stubble as much as over here. He said, I believe now that my biology is working for me because of that. We have a dealer in Nebraska who, his brother was a toxicologist at the University of Kentucky, and he always used to talk about, I don't know what the new ones are today, but he would talk about the triple stack and then the A stack and then you had to buy the enzymes to even break the stubble down because it wasn't natural anymore, and your corn stalks wouldn't even break down. So this is pretty cool. Just one of the many pieces of evidence that we have about biology working for us. What we've chosen to do with products, you already know about the SR. Some of this is what we've talked to in these smaller packages. We've talked to some of these hobby farmers and backyard people, and the homestead movement's a pretty big thing, and those people are latching onto these concepts really well. So some of this is geared to that, but the SR blend, by the way, we have found that when we have used Redmond salt or Redmond conditioner, we always get a synergistic effect with the two together. We have found that in every case, whether we've tested the soil or fed it to animals. And so the products that we do, you can use either one of those in your soil. This is SR50 that we put some highly soluble humates. We work with Dr. Mir on that. I won't say his last name because I can't pronounce it because he lives halfway around the world. But he's kind of the humate guru. I first listened to him at the University of Idaho. He's one of those guys that said that circle of all those minerals, he said, we really don't understand that. He said, but the cool thing is, God made products like humates and like compost and cow manure and Redmond minerals and whatever else, and nature knows what to do with that circle of that cobweb of all those interactions. So I always appreciate when people at that level say things like that. So SR50 with humates. This one, we've got several truckloads going out again this year. We did some testing with it. This is SR50, same soluble humates. We have found another volcanic material, kind of like conditioner, next door in Nevada, that's a lot higher in sulfur, which usually those negatives tend to leach out pretty quick in the soil. And so that's what that has. The only difference between that and this one is this one now for people who don't have your own corrals and manure and stuff. That one has organic chicken manure in it. So that's probably going to be our backyard thing, but we have a lot of people using SR50 and the stuff with the humates and the other volcanic minerals in.
Does that come any bigger than 50-pound bags?
Yeah, we're just toting that up. For the real farmers like you guys, we're just toting that up and sending it out that way. So that soil test kit, I'll talk about it because it's up there. You guys probably, first of all, your soil's not going to change real fast. You already know that. You probably don't need to test it more than every 3 years or something. You just don't move it very fast. The only way you move soil fast is if you throw a lot of stuff at it. I mean, a lot of stuff. And that's usually not very affordable. This little test, you can use it. This technology came out of Montana State. The results, in fact, I think I have a thing. These results, when they give them to you, are plant available nutrients only. So it isn't the standard results you get on a test. So the biggest reason we sell that, again, probably to those people, you guys can keep using the extension or your favorite lab, that's fine. If you want to play with these, that's fine too. But you'll get the 14 minerals and pH, and that's about it. So if you want other things like cation exchange capacity or sugars or whatever else, you can keep going where you're going. But they're plant available, and this is so simple to use. You mail it off, register your kit, mail it off. They email your results back to you. This is what you get. Easy to read. But I won't worry about spending any time on that. One more thing on the feed quality. We've had people that like to take our salt. I don't suggest it with the clay so much, the conditioner, because it is a volcanic clay. It can tend to gum up your system if you're not careful and keep it agitated. But just a lot of guys will make some brine out of this and foliar spray. And we've even had a company with private label several years ago for a while. They sold a lot of it that way, just to make a thing that they put in different recipes. And Agra Energy, if you've heard of their name, they do some work up in here. They got Redmond salt going in most of their recipes. But just foliar spray, the increase in plant quality when you do that. This is the increase over not spraying. So just again, one more piece of evidence that the feed quality goes up when you do this stuff.
Are you talking about like iron
Yeah, you could do that, or guys that, well, out where we live, you can just run it through the pivot, or if you're driving across the field anyway, you can put it in whatever else you're putting, you can just spray it on. You don't need much when you do this. The best story came from New Mexico, a guy trying to grass finish steers. He did have pivots down there, and he's just like, this was a no-brainer, because I had these 1,200 pounders, but I couldn't get them to finish. But I had plenty of grass under these pivots, and he got a hold of this from somewhere, somebody, and he just said, man, as soon as I sprayed that stuff through the pivot, it was just a game changer, and it lasted quite a while. But you're only, if you ever do that, you're only talking like 4 pounds an acre, so it's like peanuts. It doesn't even cost anything. But anybody, any agronomist knows, just like the agri-energy guys, when I first learned it was in all the recipes, Redmond salt has an off-the-charts level for electrical conductivity. And that EC, they call it, on your soil test sometimes, that is the stuff that jolts everything into action. So Redmond salt is your spark plug to an engine, and Redmond conditioner is basically, it's high in CEC, or the cation exchange capacity. Basically, that increases everything's ability and level to the nutrients, to release them, to hold water, things like that. And in the soil products she makes do the same thing, even to a greater level. The cation exchange capacity is just tremendous. And that's a big deal. It gives the bugs somewhere to live, and it makes the exchange of nutrients happen really well. And again, the same thing's happening in the rumen. So you guys that have fed Redmond, the same thing's going on in the belly of your critters. Okay. Are there questions on the soil side? I'll take whatever questions after we visit or during or whatever if you want to. I'll talk about the animal side a little bit as well. But that's kind of the gist of the soil thing. We realize, with the vast amount of acres you guys have out here, you can only afford to do so much. But the thing we suggest is if you got like a high production area, or if you got a section that you just know you're feeding and this is going to the heifers or whatever, and if you want to fill around with 5 or 10 or 100 acres, it doesn't cost much to do it. If you want to do that, try it and see for yourself. But just know that when you talk about differences like what we've seen, you don't, well, at least I can't. I can't see a half a ton per acre. I can't see 15 points of relative feed value with my eye. So if you do test this, you probably ought to measure and make sure you know what you got and see if it did it for you too, like it has for us.
So how are the applications being made, like in those trials?
The trials we did were pretty much just broadcast dry. So we just go out. Our sweet spot, thank you for asking, our sweet spot for application, we have just found we like SR50, we like that 50-50 blend. There is a lot of punch to Redmond salt going into the soil. If you're already a heavy clay on your property, you may not even want to use Redmond conditioner, but there's a lot of punch to that Redmond salt in that. So our sweet spot we've found out in these soils, if we can get about 100 pounds of Redmond salt on an acre, that seems to be about right. And out west, where we're already so saline and so where we live, and this all comes from, out there we shoot for about 50 to get the results we're looking for. So like in the sand hills, we've had a couple of guys, they'll use SR65 or even more to get a little bit more of the Redmond conditioner because of the sand, So.
And the stuff for your soil is coarser, right? You can use 2
Yeah.
grams of answer.
You can use any of it, but we do have a coarser. So I don't know if any of you use the number 10 fine most people use on the granular salt, but there's a 4 medium. It's about like kernels of wheat, and then we have a coarser grind of conditioner too. So if you do want it for your soil, you get that, it just broadcasts better. And it'll flip out there, 50 feet like you want it to or whatever. So you can't get that all in the totes.
What's the cost per pound?
Per ton or acre or whatever, you'll have to get that from Argene. Costs always are so dependent on the freight. Now in her case, they're rolling it straight out, so the price is going to be good. You guys aren't paying for detours. And when a load goes to consumer supply and then it goes through a feed store, and these guys are pulling loads straight out, so it'll be the best price. But it's typically, don't hold me to it, but I think on a per acre basis, it's probably SR50. If you did a couple hundred pounds, it's probably gonna be, well, it's like 40, 45 bucks out to Wisconsin, so it's probably not gonna be that here because of the less freight, but yeah.
So if you have a sprayer and you're going across the ground, and it has herbicide in it or something like that, are you gonna get the same efficacy?
As far as we know, we haven't had any reports otherwise, but we haven't done a lot with foliar. But usually when people talk about it, they've usually done it with whatever else they're putting out there to make things live instead of kill them. So I don't, if you try that, try it small one time and see before you go to the trouble of mixing a lot, but we haven't heard anything that way. But definitely with anything else that, you know, like some guys will do liquid humates or they'll do any of that stuff for sure, put it where it can go. I do know this, well, here's what I do know. We've seen this a lot, we've even tried this a lot. When you put your glyphosate in your sprayer or whatever, a little bit of Redmond salt in there will make it work harder. I don't know about building a soil biology, but it'll put more punch behind Roundup than Roundup has by itself. Craziest thing, but it does. It makes everything work optimum. Nature's trying to suck that in because it recognizes it. And so when it gets tied to that, and the way it goes. Yes?
You mentioned the saline part of the soils. So if a guy's doing that 100 pounds, is that, have you guys seen where that's moved that any direction?
That's a good question. We've got some farms now that are going on about 10 years, I think. This is either year 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, but you gotta remember, you guys have all seen a 50-pound bag of your salt or mineral or whatever. Just think about putting 2 of those on an entire acre. I mean, you're kind of using it. This is one of those things about nature, more isn't better. We've tried more, and you can do more, but on a year-over-year basis like that, we haven't seen it. And I didn't put one in here, but I have a couple of soil tests to show, and these guys that have been doing it that long, because it's just not much. And so it gets utilized what's there.
Okay.
In fact, the same guys that did the foliar stuff that I was talking about earlier, they have a farm in Nevada. And one time he says, we need to take 4 or 5 loads out there and put under the pivots. He said, I'm gonna use 300 or 400 pounds. I said, why are you doing that? You're a foliar guy. He said, well, it takes so little when you do foliar. He said, I know enough about this stuff that I just gotta get my soil going again. So he bought it and he put like 400 pounds an acre on. So you can do that. If you put a lot like that, you probably don't need to come back very often and do that. But at 100 pounds an acre, I mean, that's pretty much what you're doing for food. You're not, I mean, most people get wigged out with salt on the soil. First of all, it's not just salt, it's a trace mineralized, natural balanced, but you're just not putting much on.
Okay.
It's just a seasoning, basically. Anything else on the soil? And if you think of it, come back to it. To talk about the animals just a little bit. Yeah.
Just like a spinner, you know, something called the hand tractor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to put a carrier in there? Keep some spreader down low enough for 100 pounds an acre?
Yeah, I guess, well, I mean, I can tell you that the mixture is gonna run about 75 pounds a cubic foot, so depending on your system. When I did it out on our little farm at Redmond that we have, I was able to crank it down, so I'm not sure what all systems you have, but yeah, you might need to know that number if you do play with it. Just remember, I mean, salt, the conditioner's a little lighter, but if you're using them together, just go with about 75 and you'll be close. 75 pounds per cubic. That's the weight, that's the cubic weight, yeah, per cubic, 75 pounds a cubic foot. Okay, on the animal side, the first thing that most people have learned, if you guys have a different story, you can share it or either way, but people have told us all the time for years and years and years, animals just love this stuff. If they have an option to have this, they'll take it before anything else. And that's usually what we've found to be true. So we won't spend a lot of time on that, but they do seek it out. There's just something about it. And in a few minutes, I'll talk about why that is. This is one of my favorite things when I talk about the difference between salt, refined white salt versus Redmond. Just about 2 years ago, we had Montana State do this. And the only difference, when I first went to them, I said, hey, I want to put up Redmond salt against your trace mineral package. I want to do that. And they're like, no, you can't do that. Redmond salt doesn't have enough stuff in it. And I said, I want to do it anyway. I said, no, we're not going to risk our cattle to that. So they wouldn't do it. So I said, all right, share with me your mineral pack and I'll tell you if I like it or not. So they did. And so the mineral pack that they added wasn't very heavy. So the only difference in this study was in this one, they put Redmond salt plus the mineral pack that they wanted. In this trial, the white salt with the same exact mineral pack added. And then they have the system here, a few of them do, I think South Dakota even does, I was talking to them, but they have the system with the way the calves can go in and the ones that are tagged for whatever, it'll go in and pick it out so that they have to have whichever one they're coded for. So either the white salt or Redmond salt with the trace mineral. So this is the result of that study, cows too. So if you look at this, this is not even quite 90 days, about 84 days I think long they measured. This much difference in the weight in kilograms is 23 pounds on those calves in 3 months. The difference even the cows gain in the bounce back is, what was that? I added that up the other day. It's even more, it's like 35 pounds. So the cows gain 35 pounds, the calves gain 23 pounds in the same 90 days, just with the difference of salt. Explain that to me. I don't know that I have the answer. The only thing we know from all the pieces that we can glean is that nature knows what to do with stuff that's made by nature. And those traces make a difference in that salt. That's a pretty cool study. I find a lot of value in that. Here's the other thing. Because the mineral levels on the bags, as you guys look at them, they're not that high, right? I get that all the time. Well, shoot, you don't have enough calcium, you don't have whatever, enough of it. This study right here, liver biopsies, this is what the university, this is Utah State and Michigan State, I think it is, yeah, Michigan. This is what they say is acceptable. This was done on dairy cows, 4 different herds. They totaled about 2,200 between the 4 herds. The normal acceptable range, like calcium, for example, is 30 to 200, where these livers fell in. And you can do liver biopsies on live cows. That's another one, by the way, if you ever want to do that, talk to your vet. If you want to take 2 or 3 of your average cows just to see where you're at, you can do that. Put them in a chute, shave it, take a little iron coat hanger thing between rib 12 and 13, going about that far, take a tiny, tiny little snippet of liver, take it out, turn her loose, and you can do this analysis. So that's a good way to go. The liver won't tell you why. I used to do blood all the time, and they said, do the liver. So we did. So we took 4 herds. This is dairy cows, mind you. These cows are tweaked out. You already know that. These are farmers that said, okay, we're going to do this Redmond thing. They went with the SR program, and they had thrown out the other minerals and vitamins totally. Said, okay, this will be good. We want to see if these cows are going to turn green and their tits are going to fall off like all the nutritionists tell us they are. Let's see where it's at. So we tested these cows. This is the high group, by the way. So these are all the cows that calved. They're within about 90 days of calving. And you know what that means. They're under their highest load that they have in their entire life right there. Especially when these gals were making 80 and 90 pounds of milk. And so we took about a half a dozen of each of those cows out of those herds, out of the high group, and this is how the livers came back. The livers are totally happy, totally content. The other cool thing that I don't have a slide up that I'll show you, but one of those herds, I said, yeah, well, that's only half the story. He showed us his conception rates, because those guys all AI everything, you know. And he said, we've never looked back, and we got a chart that's just picture perfect that shows that. The other thing that we have these guys tell us is when they start feeding Redmond conditioner, these cows come in heat. We even had a hog guy in Iowa raising hogs. He said, it's been a while since I've seen the sows ride, since I was a kid. He said, about 3 weeks into Redmond conditioner, I had 3 of them stacked up. He said, I just haven't seen that for a long time. So that, you already know that if that happens, you're not screwing stuff up. Because if you're screwing stuff up, the repro's going to be the first thing that goes. So this told us, well, these cows didn't fall off the cliff, and their tits didn't fall off. So that was interesting. Do we say don't feed anything else? No, we don't say that. This was just research. It was interesting to find that. But to have this be happy and to have repro still working, that got our attention.
How much were they feeding?
What's that?
How much were they feeding?
These dairy guys are doing, we've got to where now we feed between 3/4 and a pound per head per day. On these cows, they're getting 30 pounds of silage and 20 pounds of high moisture corn type diets. Just because that Redmond conditioner, you feed more of that when the rumen's under stress. For you guys, unless you're feedlotting them, you don't need that much conditioner because the rumen's under stress. But when you go that acidic and you have that much risk for toxins because you're feeding all these wet feeds, silage and everything, we crank that conditioner up to take care of all that. But we're taking out toxin binders and we're taking out, you know, buffering agents. We'll go head to head with bicarb all day. We don't even put bicarb in our dairy rations anymore. The mineral profile, because see, Redmond conditioner is not Redmond salt, and so it's only got a couple of percentage points of salt naturally occurring. So Redmond conditioner, essentially like calcium, for example, in our salt you got about 0.5%. In conditioner you got about 5%. So don't discount the minerals that are in that too, but the cool thing is you have all of that spectrum, the way that the volcanoes and the sea made it, the way God intended it to be, and that synergy and that circle just works differently when you have all that together. Nowhere else do you get that kind of a complement of those minerals working together like that.
So if you have cows on board stocks, you should probably give them a mineral too, as a conditioner.
Yeah, especially because I imagine you probably got a lot of spilled corn. We had a herd one time that happened. There was a pretty big spill, and the cows, the vet came out, they were tipping over. The vet rolled them off. I'm not sure why the guy thought to call me, and I said, well, see if they'll eat any conditioner, man. He hauled it out there, and the cows that could still get to her, even carried it to them, they just vacuumed it up. They knew right now what was going on, and he saved most of them with that, and as the vet drove away. So yeah, when they're under stress, they'll clobber Redmond conditioner. But your grazing animals won't hit it as hard if they're not under stress because they just don't, you know, they can go graze like they're supposed to. So I don't know if I fully answered, but I realized I forgot to say a couple of things to that. Did that answer that question? Okay. So that's just one of the cool things about conditioner. It'll do all those things. It does it really well. I still like to get conditioner even in grazing animals. I was grass finishing my own steers for quite a while that we put in our freezer. And I would, you know, I can still get that 1,400 pound steer in about 20 months. But when I put conditioner in there, it just, man, you know what I'm saying when you look at their eyes and it's just like they're fully alert and they're bright, but they're also complacent and calm. They're not strung out, and just the way they would gain at the end there, especially in the heat of the summer, because I'd kill them in September so I could truly finish them on good grass. So I saw that happening even in grass situations. So we still like to throw conditioner at them all the time. Here's another one to speak for conditioner. I don't want to get you too lost. There's a lot of information on this, but to suffice it to say that, well, the story behind this is we have a distributor in Mexico that is feeding a lot. He'll take like 8 ounces a day of Redmond salt and feed these dairy cows. There was a UC Davis the researcher that did this, was down there one time, just happened to be there at the same time we were. And she said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Yeah, that's what they always tell us." You can't do it. But look at what's going on. So she comes back, starts researching it. She said, "There's nothing about sea salt. I can't find research on this kind of stuff." I said, "Well, yeah, because there's no money to be made on it, you know? So it's not going to be research, because guys like us probably aren't going to pay." Because she still sought it after us after the study. She still came at us for wanting us to spend another $250,000 and study X, Y, and Z. But that's how this came about. And so we just basically put Redmond conditioner in calves, newborn dairy calves, because the scours rate and the death rate early on is what kills those guys. And so essentially we measured the blood mineral profiles. She preferred to call it smectite instead of Redmond conditioner. Smectite clay group. There are a gazillion kinds of clays. We're not even going to go there today. So that's the Redmond conditioner group. You can see the mineral profiles. Measured the immune response in these calves. The treatment was only those first 10 days. The Redmond, the amount of immunoglobulins, the immune response was that much higher than the standard calves. Essentially what all that meant was you got better blood, you got better immune response, and in that study we lost 63% fewer calves than the control group. So she was blown away at it, and then the sales hat came on, and then she said, "Well, you got to do all these cool things. You got to add foo-foo dust, and you got to charge $100 for it like everybody else does." And we said, "No, we don't." So use conditioner in your calves too. That's all I wanted to show you about that. So you guys probably already know, but our straight salt, we've got garlic salt. You step up to a selenium 90, that's got 6 added trace minerals besides just the Redmond salt for those who need that. And it's the common 6 that the industry kind of uses most of the time, because that's usually what's lacking. You can step up to the beef mineral if you need a little bit more of the vitamins, calcium, phos. We don't put a lot in there, and I won't put a lot in there, and I'll tell you why in a minute. You can still get rock chunks, but those are usually branded for goats and horses. You can get them if you want, but you can get pressed blocks. We've done sheep mineral, which would be similar to beef mineral and the goat mineral, like those, and obviously Redmond conditioner. But here's how you feed these. Essentially, no matter what you do, I think, no matter which mineral you choose, and I'll go back in a second, but we're suggesting that on grazing operations like out here, if you can get 20, 25, 30% Redmond conditioner, and with which salt product you use, that's a pretty good ratio. The critters still usually go after that, but use that conditioner to gauge it. So make sure you're getting the intakes you like, make sure they're still hitting it, and if they're not, back off the conditioner a little bit, because there's no fluff in there. There's no sweet, there's no flavor. So if they just don't want to touch that, don't force it. Just back that off a little bit. But if they'll continue eating the salt with that in, you'll like the benefits that you're going to see because of the stimulation it's going to give the gut. Feed efficiency is one we didn't even talk about, but we've got feed efficiency studies as well with Redmond conditioner. I mean, when you stimulate the gut, just like the soil, stuff happens. It's just nature can't help it when you give it the right stuff.
What if you try putting the conditioner in and then they just won't touch it unless you completely pull it out?
That's fine. Yeah, just don't worry about it.
Okay.
And if you ever have a time that you know you're going to be stressed, you can try again, and that's fine.
Okay. Because we tried it last year,
and they
just
didn't really
quit eating it, period,
Yeah.
until we pulled it completely out.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Okay.
I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Okay.
That they're just telling you that, hey, we're pretty good.
Okay.
That means your feed's probably pretty good. And
I got a quick one on that.
yeah,
I've just been feeding my 2 bags of salt, fine tin, and a bag of conditioner, try to mix it up best I can. But I'm feeding them unprotected, like an overlay tub, which gets rained on, water sets in. Is that affecting the efficiency of the
well,
product?
what did your animals do with it? Do they?
It cakes up a little bit. So it's hard for them. The intake drops back, but it seems like even it's protected.
they usually do. Of course, where we live, fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, I try to keep it fairly fresh. So, I mean, when I was ranching, we had 50,000 acres. I could still get out there a couple times a week though, because I kept my cows, fairly together. So I like to keep it fresh. If you can keep a week or at most out there, that seems to help. And when I was doing it on my smaller scale at home, that was a lot easier to do, but that definitely helps, especially with the conditioner in. But usually they'll pound through it anyway, most people tell us, but yeah, the fresher you can keep it, and if you can make any of those covered ones, if that's in the cards for you, that helps, but.
But it's not screwing up the effectiveness of the product?
No,
Okay.
yeah,
It's not
you
something
can't,
to consider.
yeah, nothing like that. So the way you choose which to use, in the summertime, if you know you got decent grass, you can tell what your critters look like. If they're shining up doing stuff like that, you're probably gonna be just fine with 10 fine or 4 medium. If you think you need a little bit of something else, or if you want the fly control, choose the garlic. If you want a little bit of something else, you use the Selenium 90. And if you want just a little bit more, you can use the beef mineral or whichever species you have. And that pretty much is it. And here's why I can tell you what I'm telling you. This is, yeah. I have, if I were to record them, I would have albums of phone calls from guys that it's like, man, I just had another one the other day. I don't want to slam on any competitor, but he had a pretty heavy chelated pack of minerals going in, and you guys know what it is, but they take some copper and some manganese and zinc and cobalt, they chelate those, and when you chelate stuff, that means you attach it to a protein so the body can't not use it. It is forced to use it. If ever you choose to use like selenium yeast, that's the same concept, but you'll notice on the bag it says you cannot exceed 3 parts per million. If you do, all bets are off, because you'll kill a cow just as dead with selenium as you will arsenic. They're right beside each other on the periodic table. So this guy came at me with that. I've had this 100 times. And so the first thing, if they tell me, hey, I got a 12% calcium mineral, and man, I hate to get off of it. And I said, okay, go down the list, tell me how much salt there is. I said, I'm gonna guess it's probably 15, give or take 1% or 2. Yep. And then I'll say, okay, go down to your ingredient statement. What are the first 3 ingredients? Probably dical is number 1. Yep. And plant products is probably number 2 or 3, right? Yep. I said, you know what they have in there? For every ton of that mineral you're buying, you're paying for about 300 pounds of grain products and or molasses. I said, you know why they put that in there? No. I said, because I guarantee those cows would not touch that if that wasn't in there. I guarantee it. That mineral is so screwed up and out of balance because, and I got a chart I can show you later if we want to. If you, the way these mineral programs are designed, and people will tell you, and I know, I'm standing here telling you, I'm flying 180 degrees different from what the book says. They're balancing mineral programs with about 15% salt in them because that's what the NRC book says. But the thing that they're doing, or the thing they're not doing, they are giving you 0 credence to what is in your feed. So I've got a little chart. I showed it with Margine already. She can share it with you anytime. We can look at it today if you want to. But when you analyze the feed you're feeding, nobody did this before. So I finally did it myself. And I learned a lot from Gerald Fry, if that's a name any of you know. He passed away a couple of years ago. Steve Campbell used to hang out with him a little bit. I've got the NRC values. We know what the cows need, at least according to the book. And before I go any further, I'm just going to tell you this. If you carefully read the NRC book, read it carefully, you will find all kinds of language like, when you have a range of 20 to 300, okay, that's like 10x. That's acceptable. So one cow's going to be fine at 20, but another one's going to need to be 300. So when you read the NRC book, just know and look for the language of Well, these guys, you know how that's made, right? The NRC book. You've got a bunch of smart people. They take a panel of 15 or 20 or whatever of researchers from notable institutions across the United States. They go through everything from water to protein, all the vitamins, minerals, energy, fat, you name it. And they scrutinize all the research, and then they write the book on nutrition. That's what the NRC, that's how it's made. So you look at the minerals section of that book, and they'll say, well, these guys studied this, these guys overfed this because they wanted to see what happened, these guys underfed, these guys did this, and watch for language like, we think, we believe, we're not sure, this is kind of the accepted range, and vitamins, good luck. Not well established. You'll even find language that hard in there. So just, and I'm not cussing at you guys, all I'm saying is, this is not an exact science. Mineral metabolism with all the other physiology going on with enzymes and hormones and bacteria and protozoa and everything else that's going on, this is extremely complex. But God didn't mean for it to, we're talking about the simple on the other side of all that complexity. Like you already know what manure does to your garden. That's the simple on the other side that we want to focus on. So just know that when you read the NRC book. Okay, outside of that little tangent, back to what I was telling you. I know what the NRC book says, and remember there are going to be ranges. We can plug in your feed.
You could show it.
I just thought I'd show it to you, hadn't I? That would just make it a whole lot easier. Don't get lost with this slide. I don't believe in a lot of data on slides. Forget about everything from column H over. Don't even look at it. So, because you can't find this anywhere, I did it myself. Here's the NRC value for all those minerals. Here's the NRC requirement in milligrams. And I'll tell you why I did that in a minute. You can take right off your feed test, just plug those numbers in, and it'll tell you if you're adequate or low. The point here is people doing calcium, high phosphorus and calcium products all the time, where they're cranking copper up to, we have a mix out in our country that one of the vets wanted 2%. That 2%, you guys know how to do parts per million to percent? Just move your decimal 4 places. So if you got like a 300 part per million mineral, move the decimal 3 points, so it's 0.03%. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 would be 300 parts per million. The whole point here is when you look at what you're feeding against what MRC says, you're not going to be that far off. So when I say you're probably good in the summertime with 10 fine and in the wintertime with either slaying 90 and beef, I mean that. I would challenge with the soil you have out here that I wish I could haul a boatload of it home to my place, all this wonderful black soil. This one, for example, when your feeds are coming in at 0.4 and the NRC's calling for 0.31, you're not deficient. And so on it goes. Then you can take, if you are a little bit low, guess where you're usually low? Salt. That's usually where you're low on any feed test. Why is it that cows always want to seek that out? And when they seek out Redmond salt and they quit eating everything else, what does that tell you? That means you got more feed than these guys are giving you credit for. They want salt. They might need a little bit of these trace minerals, and some of these feed tests won't even give them to you. So here's what happens on the dairy rations when they test it. They'll test calcium and phos. They might test a couple of the other minerals. They don't even test the trace minerals. Then they sell you a package of minerals that is 100% of the NRC value on a daily basis, giving you 0 credit for what's in your feed. You know how those guys are paid? By the mineral. Why would they not sell you that? So when we walk into these farms, and I had a guy just the other day, I was at a grazing conference. He did the cafeteria program, which is fine. He's spending like 30 cents a day. I'm like, dude, I would okay, take our beef mineral even, the most expensive one. I'd put it up against that all day long, see what happens to them, and that's going to cost you like 7 cents. This isn't that hard. You guys can do this. And I'm trying to figure out a way to how to post this so you can even get on the website, just do it yourself. Plug in your feed sample, you can see what's missing. You can plug in whatever brand you're using, or you can choose out of Redmond here, And if you happen to be low somewhere, it'll tell you if you're adequate or low, and just take the brain damage out of it. Now, just remember that it's all, there are ranges. Just because the book says this and you're 10 parts per million low, when you start talking 3, 4, 10, 20, even 100 parts per million, who can even explain that? My funnest story was when I was in Billings, we were being broadcast on the local radio there for, it was one of the events, I can't remember. Turns out the nutritionist that was there happened to be my cousin's boy. So it's like, oh, this is cool. So the guy on the radio, he says, he had interviewed him first before he interviewed me, and he said, so out of all the mineral programs out there, why should I buy yours? And this poor cousin kid of mine, with all the confidence he could, how he could have, he just went into why calcium's important, why phosphorus, he just went down the book. You can read that all day long, you guys can do it. Selenium does this, calcium, he didn't really answer the question. And so when it comes to Redmond, it's like nature knows what to do with this stuff. It reacts entirely different in the body. You want difference? You're not going to believe it by looking at the label, but go try it and watch what happens. And just because the book says this, we've defied the book several times. Back to that Dr. Campbell, the reason that happens, he said it in a very politically correct and a nice way, but basically, he was talking about the human health industry. He said the trouble is with this drug thing, and you guys have all been there and seen it, but he said nobody really studies and does health because there's no money in it. He said that in a really nice way, and it's unfortunate. I mean, if you haven't done that, challenge next time you go to the doctor, not to be rude or anything, but just start asking questions about your health. How do I, and I guess I should talk about Redmond. Did one of you guys have a Redmond question? This is an example of that. So Redmond, you can, if you listen to Eli Lilly and Company, they'll tell you what it is, and I hope nobody's from there, because I'm not trying to badmouth, but they'll tell you in a really nice way that basically Rumensin is an antibiotic, but they won't tell you it's antibiotic. Essentially, you're killing bacteria. That's what antibiotics do. And when you feed a rumen a whole bunch of high starchy carbohydrates, you're going to create problems. And that Rumensin kind of takes care of some of that. Am I saying don't feed it? No, I'm not saying that. Does it work? I think a lot of people have shown that it works. But Redmond's approach, or even a higher approach in my mind, is, okay, you're killing some stuff that doesn't belong there. It's there because we're not feeding the way that God made them to eat. I'm not saying that's wrong either, because you got to finish them efficiently and you got to do it economically. But when we feed Redmond conditioner, we're actually encouraging the biology that's there to do what it's supposed to do. So when we feed conditioner, we have many, many customers who say, I don't need Rumensin anymore because the biology is doing what it's supposed to do. So we're trying to take the health approach and to build what is supposed to be happening instead of trying to kill something that doesn't belong because we screwed up. So the whole approach is, how do we build health instead of treat what we've messed up, if that makes any sense. So if you just can't, I was talking to one feedlot out there in Utah, and he said, man, I would love if that would work. I need to follow up with him. He said, it wasn't Rumensin, but he said, the problem I've had in my feedlot is once I get on any of that stuff, if I ever stop, whatever was there comes back with a vengeance. He said, now I have to use it. I can't not use the drugs. I have to. I'm like, man, that is a hard spot to be. Man, if we could just build in the health to begin with and then let biology do what it's supposed to do. I mean, nature is trying to do that. You guys know, this is what's so cool is I'm telling you stuff nobody else is going to tell you because there's no money in it. But think about it. You scratch up your arm. Nature wants to heal. Nature's trying to do whatever it needs to do to heal. And it's doing the same thing in the land and in your animals all the time. If we just give it the stuff that it can work with, it'll do it. That's what's cool about this way of thinking. It's not always easy, it's not always economical to get the products, but
If you switch out your Redmond for your conditioner, do that in like a month.
you're probably gonna feed more conditioner. But see what, the first thing that's gonna happen, this is why you probably, depending on how much, corn or whatever you're giving them to cause that acid to drop in the rumen, you gotta feed enough to make sure that you're attacking that. If you attack that first so that you get the volatile fatty acid profiles right, it's gonna take a little more, because you're not just trying to kill those bacteria. A little bit of rumensin will kill a lot of bacteria. It's gonna take a little more conditioner to buffer that down. Did I tell you we did the buffer test too, by the way? That's another thing conditioner did. We put that head to head on a 90-pound dairy with bicarb. This group got it, and this one got conditioner. Bicarb conditioner, it was the exact same buffer curve. So you're gonna buffer that effect down in the first place. That should keep things a little bit more square. But now you're throwing all those extra minerals and everything else that goes on, and you're feeding the biology instead of killing the biology. So we're fairly comfortable with replacing rumensin. Now, I say that, but man, if you're feeding a lot and your livelihood's on the line, I know if I were in your shoes, I'd go at that pretty dang cautiously. If I could, I'd probably separate a few head off and, be ready for an emergency, but I would separate a few off, and if you've got a way you could feed this pen just conditioner instead, I would try it that way, just because I'm not going to risk, you know what I mean? Feel free to just test and try. Make sure that it works. Okay, so that was my spiel on that. So if you are feeding a heavy mineral and you've had good results, I'm not going to tell you to change it. But I would say continue to conduct an experiment. There are occasions, this doesn't happen often, but there are occasions that when somebody is feeding a heavy mineral and they introduce Redmond, that the cattle won't eat the Redmond salt. If that happens, in the word of this professor I talked about earlier, he said Redmond makes everything in the body work optimal. And if these cows are kind of messed up, they don't want to do anything more that's going to mess it up. So if your cattle aren't eating Redmond, then my first question is, are they on a pretty heavy mineral program? And if they are, take it out. Take everything out. And I promise the cows aren't going to turn green, their tits aren't going to fall off. Give it a month to let their system get cleaned out. Then if you want to introduce them both back, and now see what they do with it once they're not out of balance anymore. Because see, when you start, I was listening to a health coach here that I found the other day. When you pump gobs of calcium, for example, you start putting a taxing load on the adrenal system and everything else, and it's trying to pump more sodium and potassium into the body to deal with that. It doesn't need those high doses. So if that ever happens, pull them all out. And they'll be fine. I know they will, because before I ever knew about Redmond, when I was ranching in Montana, we didn't do a lot of minerals. And so for those cows, whatever you gave them, they would snarf up, because we didn't feed them. Now that's wind, water, and white salt country over there, right? So that was about what they got. I wish I could go back there now and knowing what I've learned and do Redmond. That was clear back when I was first out of college, but I think the Acrobats guys are about to get them going on that stuff now. So anyway, that's just something to be thinking about. Let's not overcomplicate it. I think you're going to be in good shape. And if you've got a feed test, we'll be happy to plug it in here and we can see where you're sitting. If you're feeding 2 or 3 ingredients, just make sure you get the ratios of what you're feeding and we can submit it, just have one test. Otherwise, we could analyze them all and then just do the math, but it would be easier if you're feeding the TMR just to get that sample and you can know just that fast. And I really don't care, you guys can have this if you want it and plug in the numbers and let it show you. Any questions more on that? Let's see if I got. Is there anything I missed? Oh, somebody, yes.
The C90, that's out there versus the selenium.
Okay, what,
C90, I believe, is another company. Right?
do any, you guys, do any of you run into C90?
Hear a lot of
Heard of it.
You've heard of it? Are there certain questions about it? That you've,
C90 is claiming they got twice as many minerals as ours, as Redmond's.
okay,
There's some people wanting to try that instead.
Okay. has, when they talk about C90, they talk about iron? Does that ever come up?
Not as much, it's usually just that they say there's more minerals per pound.
Well, they usually attack us for iron, so maybe I should address something that's not even a question to you. But I guess I'm gonna go there anyway, because I got one more thing I'm gonna teach you guys. But first of all, to answer that question, selenium, or C90, that is Pacific Ocean salt, and they harvest that off the Baja Peninsula in Mexico there. So that's where that comes from. And the first thing I'll say about any salt that anybody wants to use, if you don't use Redmond, at least pick one that hasn't been refined. Pick a Himalayan one, even if it's a modern C one, because it's just going to be better than a refined one. Because the refined one, like when you fly over Salt Lake, if your plane goes over where the settling ponds are, they chemical shock treat those and they pull different things out. The money's all in all those minerals they pull out of it. And then you get sodium chloride, which technically is a toxic compound. That's why it just doesn't do the same thing as a buffered, refined, mineralized natural salt. So you won't go wrong using C90. The claim about more minerals, I have tested those. The lab I use will test, most labs will test about 64 minerals now. And I've done this a lot. Last year I did 2 more comprehensive, cost me about $1,000 each time I do it. But I've tested everything the lab will give me. And you've seen those mineral analysis where you'll see a less than sign in front of a number. That means there's a number there, but that just means they tested down to that point and didn't find it. Doesn't mean it isn't there, but they didn't find it. So this I can tell you for sure, the last 2 tests I did last year, the more mineral thing, I think the reason they say that is because when you analyze just the sodium, Redmond tends to run between about 31 and 33 or 4%, and C90 tends to run about 30. It runs about 2 or 3 points less sodium. That's not 12 times more. The other thing is when you measure those 64 minerals, the ones that will show up, Redmond will usually have at least a dozen more minerals that don't have a less than sign than even C90 does. So then my question is, okay, what is in it? If it has a little less sodium, we have more minerals showing up just in number. The amounts of minerals are fairly similar because they're C minerals. So the differences aren't as big as they want to make them. The other thing that I don't know enough about, but if you click on microplastics or Pacific garbage, you'll get inundated. Just try that online. And there are a couple of health coaches that say avoid modern ocean sea salts because they're at the level of microplastics that are in there. I don't know. So that's one thing we like about Redmond is it's been down in the earth since it was made, and it's clean. There's, So the differences aren't that great. You're buying, I've tested this too, you're buying about 3% water when you get that stuff because it's a dried salt. It's not all the way dry, so you're shipping a little bit of water. Mineral profiles are pretty close, but that's just how they sell it. I know Bob King, we talk a lot when we see each other at shows and stuff, and they've cranked up their marketing lately. He either sold or hired a marketing campaign firm to get out there and go, and they're hustling. But the one thing that I do want to show you, this is the other thing you can write down and take home when you get back to oh, I gotta show you this first. Garlic. We had an Oregon guy sent us this picture. This cow they just brought new into the herd. She's got all the flies on. So, you guys have probably had.
Why is the garlic so expensive? Salt?
Yeah,
Are you guys mixing it by hand?
yeah, we are. It takes a big stick. The organic stuff always is, so we've got the organic and not. The other stuff is highly concentrated. That's why we don't have to use so much of it. So whatever the process is to get that, it's just expensive to get. Mixing's easy, because all we got to do is, throw it in our system that we mix any mineral with. So that part doesn't cost us any more, but it's just expensive stuff.
So it's supposed to be better than a lot of garlic products, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so they call it 12X because it's so concentrated. You can use a lot less of it. And then anything organic, as you know, just costs more to raise it. So, yeah.
But it's like your regular, fine 10 that has garlic in it, I mean, that would be organic garlic, is it?
If you choose to get the organic, you just have to specify it. But if you don't need the organic, I wouldn't even worry about it unless you're
It feels
sure.
like
Unless you're certified.
for organic, and it's, yeah.
Well, it's just so expensive just to get that stuff. It's unfortunate, but it's just really expensive. I was going to show you one more thing when it comes to toxins. Do any of you guys put up silage? Is that something you feed and put? Oh, okay. Well, you know what a good pit looks like then.
Got a bunch of choppers there.
1 pound a ton during harvest, 1 pound per 10 square feet on top. Take a look at that. I took this picture a couple weeks ago in Georgia. It's wet down there. Look at that silage pit. We've been having great results with that. That's just a tarp. What's that?
They've got a tarp.
Yes, yes. The toxin loads are low. Okay, I want to show you. That was just a side note. So one of the other things that competitor Salt will claim is they'll say, well, Redmond's got too much iron. So, okay, if you're going to throw the book at me, I'm going to use the book to answer the question. If you want to throw the book at me, a cow needs 50 milligrams per kilogram per day. This next part's cool. You're going to take notes on this because this way you can figure out to help answer the question on that other chart. I'll show you the math. So a cow needs 50 milligrams per kilogram of iron per day. That's right out of the book. I had a guy one time come to me who said, hey, but your bag says you got 300 parts per million. That's too much. And I thought, okay, this guy doesn't know how to do the math. So, and nobody does, because they don't teach it to you. So, what that means is milligrams per kilogram is the exact same as parts per million. So if you didn't know that, there's one to take home. But the thing is, when a cow can eat 50 milligrams per kilo, I'll get into that. I've got a slide that'll show you. But the first thing when they talk about iron, when you look at the difference between the two, this ruler was the best way I could visualize it. There's the amount of iron between our two products, and they accuse us of having too much. 12 inches is the requirement for a cow in a day, okay? I'm going to show you how now to calculate this stuff. This is fascinating to me. So if the cow requirement is 50 milligrams per kilogram, that's the same as parts per million. If she's eating a 45-pound diet, you got to do the math. She should be getting 1,000 milligrams a day. So when the guy comes to me and says, you got 300, you got too much, I said, no, I don't. She needs at least 1,000 today, according to the book. Okay? Redmond salt, this is one of the things I learned from Gerald Fry. I appreciate him for teaching me this, because he's the one that started me on my path. He doesn't even know it, but he started me on my path to this. You take the 300 that it says on the bag, times it by 0.0284. That's a number you just write down, because it's always going to be the same. That's how many milligrams are in an ounce. That's why on my other table you had to have milligrams. You're getting 8.5 milligrams for every ounce of Redmond salt the cow eats. She needs 1,000, and you're giving her 8.5. Tell me how that's too much. If you were to go back to that picture, I'm going to show you one more first. These are the tests that we did on crops in Wisconsin, for all these soil tests I've been telling you about. These are the amounts of iron in those crops. Our corn silage, if the cow's getting 20 pounds a day, she's eating 3,000 milligrams. If she's eating 10 pounds of alfalfa, she's getting 7,000. If she's eating grass, the grasses that we tested, she's getting 12,000 milligrams a day. The requirement is 1,000, and Redmond salt is 8.5 milligrams for every ounce. You tell me how the heck we're feeding too much iron, and why all these bison and all the wild horses haven't killed over dead before we ever even showed up, because they're eating gobs and gobs and gobs of iron. This is just one of those things that it's like, sometimes the book doesn't even make sense. So, that formula right there though, that's one you can take home all day long. Those values that I showed you, the NRC values, you can take those, you can do this, you can get your own feed tag, you can multiply that, and here's how much they're getting by every, those are the formulas that I built into that table so that you can do this yourself. So if they ever do throw something at you like that, it's like, there's really nothing there. And that's even answering by the book. So, I don't know, that helps me a lot. And then there's the formula for percentage to parts per million again, just move the decimal over. So hopefully that helps on the C90. Any other questions about that? I think, unless I have forgotten anything, is there anything else you want me to talk about? Or any questions from you guys?
That silage preservative stuff, is that a granular or?
We're just using straight, like, conditioner or SR50 on that or whatever. We're just playing with that still, but the results have been really good. We want to test it because there's a lot still to figure out with that. Like, you know, what's it doing with moistures, and is it changing any of the, you know, the availability of any, is it changing NDF or anything like that?
That file you showed there or whatever, does that have preservative put on it or not?
I don't think he did. I think he just tried this. Yeah. And we want to compare that too. I want to research that so I'm just not blowing smoke. We want to see if we can get a pit with and one without. We're kind of in the works of trying to arrange a couple of those.
Would you like to pay those of you guys over there to do that?
Have you got ways you can do 2 separate pits like that, or piles?
Got about 7,000 acres, I think we can find people that
Okay. Yeah, let's talk. Yeah.
But the big problem, you know, and it's been an ongoing deal, is you can't just do one thing, you know, you can't put knot on one side and not carve it and expect it to not happen.
Right.
You know, like, it's a series of things.
Just like everything is.
Stand up on the result like that.
Right.
We wanted to try to concoct something on your baler, so you can be spraying that bale with your SR50 or something as you bale it, so that the salt will take out any moisture and toxins too.
There are parts of the country that they used to do that. Did the old timers ever do that around here? Just spray that kind of stuff on as they baled and such?
We should try it, actually, so you got it.
But I just thought you didn't have salt, you know, just salt, I mean, that already.
That's all very low rate.
Yeah, I just throw that out for FYI. I'm not telling you yet what to do, but a few of the farms we've been talking to, like that one, that have tried it. The reason that kind of came about is we were on a farm further east, and they were pumping it in the silo, and they had run out of inoculant. And having been using Redmond and familiar with it, they thought, well, it's late enough, we don't have that much to go, whatever. So they started pumping that in. And then the guy on Delbert, our guy on staff that's doing some rations for some of our dealers, he's talking to this guy one time, and because he's doing that guy's ration. And when they get down to that point in the silo, something happened, and the guy's like, what's going on? And as they got talking, it was like, oh, that's where they started, you know, that's where because in the silos it goes in bottom feeds, right? If I got that backward.
Say that again?
Did the silos, do they bottom feed that?
No.
It's so it's stacking up on top. Okay, so when so when it came down to the point of where the Redmond was, it changed some stuff in a really good way, and he's like, what the heck? And that's where they figured out that's where he started doing that. So, but then he also said, but then we learned too that if we put a lot of salt in there, it's a little harder on our equipment too. So they found that. But that's kind of how that started a couple of years back. And then they're like, man, so more of these guys have started trying that. So everything we have so far is just that. So we haven't done our diligence on the research yet. But anything else?
There was a couple, other minerals. One was for like foot rot and another one for, pink eye. What is actually added into those?
Usually if those are out of whack, and we do believe in this, by the way, you can put more stuff in if you need to treat something. Go ahead and do it. But we usually throw a little bit more iodine at it, and sometimes even copper. So like if you get our high iodized salt, it's 1,500 parts per million iodine. You wouldn't want to feed that all year, because again, looking at book values and, you know, that's therapeutic level. Technically, that's probably not even legal to feed free choice, but with that level of iodine. But a lot of guys use that when they run into foot rot season, pink eye season. But you'd want to pull that out after, because if you ever have a mineral tag, you really don't need to be over a couple hundred parts per million on a maintenance basis all year long.
You just do it for a couple of months or not even?
Yeah, you won't hurt them for that long, just to kind of make sure you're through the, you know, worst of it. And we can do that kind of stuff. We can make all kinds of mixes, and if you find that after you've put in your feed and you've done the test, and or you did some mineral biopsies, or you posted some dead animals, and by all means, if it's like, man, we just got to have more of this, you can put it in, or you can take your Redmond salt to the mill and they can add it for you, whatever. But yeah, we're not saying don't do those kind of things. You should do them when it's needed.
I've been doing that, Steve Campbell's teabag thing.
Oh,
I
okay.
think I really got my holy smoke, that.
Did that work?
Firm believer.
I'll tell
If
you.
nothing else, I ended up with some blue eyes, but nothing more. And I was kind of late
Yeah.
getting after it.
Do all of you know what he's talking about when he says the teabag thing? Steve will go teach, and because of Steve, I actually tried this on my place, because again, I live on this soil where this stuff comes from, and my critters I don't have any more, but they just didn't eat a lot of Redmond salt or conditioner or anything. I did do the test to where they would eat more Redmond than I would even put heavier mixes out just to make sure if they needed something they were getting it. But when I put it in the water, so the teabag style is you put the Redmond salt in the water tank, and by crud, mine even will drink that. So if you do that, you still keep a freshwater tank, obviously, because you can't make a saltwater solution that you're going to hit every animal in the herd. They're just too different. And we all know what happens if you try to drink just salt water. It's not a high concentration, and I've played with the levels of it. The more salt you put in, the less they drink, obviously, because it's got more in it. So, but a lot of people find that to work really well. They'll drink it, and they drink it, and that pink eye, I've heard nothing but good.
I've been doing that, constantly running tire lines. So just like for 100 pairs, I'll dump in set in a 50-pound bag, salt for whatever, 8 hours. I guess this year I was 12 hours. But then the night, take it the next day, skip a day, do it again, skip a day, do it again.
So it was just, so you only had the one water tank?
Correct.
But by alternating that way, if anybody needed to catch up on fresh water, they could. Yeah.
And I'm trying to pump stuff now where I have
Both.
constant,
Yeah.
just free choice all the time.
I don't know the answer as to why, but that's crazy.
Yeah,
A lot of
really
people,
cool.
sure.
I think Steve said it's like 90% more available.
50% more, double,
Oh, have you heard him talk
Yeah,
about that?
they'll
Just getting, what is it, back in balance or?
Yeah, essentially, but we do the same thing, but we don't take ours out ever. We go once a week to pasture, and
Yeah.
we'll fill it for last half, and just figure it out. Essentially, they're supposed to get, I figure 4 ounces of salt for the week, well, since it's 50% more available, I just put 2 ounces per head in a bag, or sometimes it's 2 bags, and put it in the tank, and it's always gone by the next week. And they just kind of very happy with that. I leave them in all week. I never take them in their house
So you're trying to put enough in the tank to get them 4 ounces for a week?
for a week, and then they get 2 ounces of garlic and 2 ounces of regular salt in a tub mixed together. But I've never had anything turned away from water, so
That's all water, so?
yeah. Most of the times, but there's dugouts that I've never seen them drink out of it always. So.
I suppose I could research what the limit is, but we all know stories of pirates, you can't drink the seawater, and it tends to run like 3.5.
Yep. 'Cause I- when,
He says 2 days on, 1 day off.
but I remember when he was talking though, that if taking in and out of it wasn't a constant flow, because if it was a constant in, if they were coming to drink, then it was different. When he was talking, I remember that. Cause that was what, 2 years ago, Margini had him, 3 years ago, and he had Steve comes on?
Yeah.
That's what I thought I remember him when he was saying that, so.
But yeah, and because of that, I tested different concentrations and strengths, and I'm just telling you, there's a linear line.
Yep.
The more you put, the less they drink. So, but they will drink it. So it just kind of depends.
You can get too much in the tank.
Yeah.
Salt will only take on. You can only get to like 26 or 7%, and then it'll be saturated, and you can't get any more salt to dissolve after that. That's dang strong stuff. So.
But that's why I figured that if the salt's still disappearing out of the bag every week, I mean, when I come back, there's no salt left, just the clay in the bag. So, I mean, they gotta be drinking it and it's not getting too potent. That's,
Yeah, you're diluted enough. Yep. Yeah, I think he's tried to zero it in. I'm still trying to figure out how it makes sense. You know, certain lengths of time to leave it in and stuff like that, but your bag's always dissolved and gone. Yeah, just a tiny little bit of fallout in there.
Yeah, I'll do the same thing. I have,
Yeah.
it's like a fire hose line, 1,000-gallon tank, and I'll just throw 25 pounds in it every morning, two out of 3 days, and pull it out, and it'll all be gone. And actually, they get to the point where they see you show up in the morning, you put that salt in the bag, and the ones that want it come run. They know what you're doing, and they actually prefer it, when they need it. So.
I wish I could know all the science behind that. This triggers a thought in my mind. The relight that's back there, I don't know if any of you guys have been drinking the relight. That's essentially what you're doing with that on the human side. I didn't realize this was happening to me. I hadn't really thought about it until one day a guy came up to me and said, "Man, you know what I love about relight?" And it's the same thing you're talking about with these. So there must be something about this in that, because you all know what it's like when you're out in the summer busting your tail and you're sweating like a horse and you're just. And then I try to drink to get caught up because I didn't drink enough early on, and then you just kind of get that waterlogged feeling. When I put salt in my water, relight my water, it doesn't do that. It's like I can drink. I can pound a gallon, and it just won't waterlog me. So there's something about. So maybe that's, I don't know. I wish I knew the science, but there must be something similar going on. So when that guy told me that, I'm like, crap, that's exactly what happens to me. I can drink more when I put relight in my water in the summertime. I don't know if it's that way with everybody, but
And I know Wendell was calling me, Wendell Nicholson, he said, he had gotten dehydrated or whatever, and he come in the house and he took, quarter of a teaspoon of salt or something, and within 15 minutes he was all right.
yeah, that's good stuff. It's cheap, and I can't make any money on it, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of power in that kind of salt for animals, humans, whatever. It doesn't get its full due, I think.
Really off the subject, what about for human use? I've seen a lot of computer stuff, but can you guys take a bag of conditioner and put a teaspoon in your water glass?
If you want to, I'm not gonna stop you.
I mean, how much do you put in that?
No. I think it's probably similar to what we find in the cows. If you got issues, you can probably and could use more. I'm not even supposed to tell you you can eat it.
Well, I know.
The FDA, you didn't hear it from me, but yeah, I'm pretty healthy. I've always tried to be, so I only use it a couple times a week. Usually I'll just put it in a shake or something because I don't want to deal with, the clayness of it. But I mean,
I tried to pinch one on that.
yeah, it stays with you a while, doesn't it? Gets in your teeth and
I think
everything.
it's clay, it says to put a teaspoon in and wait at least 4 to 6 hours before you drink it, but I usually put it in at night and drink it in the morning, and then just leave that stuff in the bottle.
Because then it all gets all silky and you don't have, then it's all totally, it's got water in it. A teaspoon a day, to me, if you're on a pretty hard drain diet, then maybe a teaspoon, I think that's plenty, but I would play with it. I don't think you're gonna do any damage at a teaspoon. I would probably tend to go more like a half, but we're just not that big of a digestive system compared to these critters we're feeding, so. But again, more if you got issues and stuff, because we have so many stories. I mean, people have perforated colons and acid reflux and you name it, and it's just like people have avoided surgery sometimes just from drinking clay. The other thing one of our dairy guys in Pennsylvania did when he was putting his water and putting it in the truck. I haven't tried this. I keep forgetting to, but you know how hot the cab gets in the summertime. That bottle of water with clay in it never got as hot as when it was just straight water. And then I'm thinking, okay, but guys always tell us on those dairies or high stress cattle, the summer stress doesn't affect them near as bad when they're on conditioner. So it's like, maybe there's something to that too. But yeah, a lot of those guys with acid or whatever, they'll just sip on that, nurse that all day long. Yeah, those are good questions. So that's the way I use clay. Clay, since we're talking about the human side too, we had an incision in our family on a procedure that got infected one time. You guys all know what that would look like. And we thought, well, this is years ago now, but hey, we got this stuff and everybody talks about it. Let's try it. And I need to tell you, by the next day it was pink and healing. And so we would go to the doctor. I know they're going to prescribe you penicillin and away we're going to go, but put that stuff on and man, it sucked it out of there so fast. It was just, because that same CEC, cationic exchange capacity, that stuff is pulling and drying. That's what it does to the toxins, the heavy metals, the molds in your silage or whatever. It's pulling that stuff out. It's doing the same thing on an incision. On our equine line of products, we have the poultice for that. These people are using it on cannon bones or muscles or whatever. It's kind of a cool product. It does one of those natural things. It does 100 things, and it's just really neat.
With that being said, that we have included the conditioner into our cat tube and into our cow tube. And that's why I figured it.
I'm guessing that tube's going to give you good results. I mean, that's essentially what we, on that UC Davis study I did, it should do those calves really well. We're playing with that for treatment too, because we've got it for the dairy guys to go in for that first month. That's why we call it that, but we're having great results in just treating too. So I would imagine that's going to treat pretty well. You guys, just a one-shot treatment thing, or are you trying to do that for like a few days or just kind of whatever?
It just as needed, I guess.
Yeah.
We only had a set of twins that were early, and I gave it to each cat, but it's got prebiotics in there, and vitamin B12 that'll help jumpstart the gut.
Mm-hmm.
With the conditioner, if there's something in there, but if you have a scouring calf or have something going on, it's certainly giving one too. corn stalks or even water. Steve Campbell said, you know, with all this rain going on, if you have corn or soybeans or whatever beside you, you have toxins in the water. So you put those tubs out there with that conditioner. You can't get them to eat the conditioner otherwise. It's there. Plus the chlorine.
The other thing Steve would say, you guys, maybe he did when you guys listened to him, but all of the effects from, you know, whatever effects might be there, or the way Steve will say it, when your neighbor uses glyphosate or whatever, he'll talk about that, but in the meantime, that conditioner really battles that kind of stuff too.
Would you be able to share that same chart that you did for the cattle with the soil?
Oh,
For the
sure,
organisms?
yeah.
I guess I was gonna ask you that question too, when you're putting that stuff in, SR50, are you getting away from all fertilizer treatment then? Or-
Thank you for that, that's a good question. This is my opinion. The difference between the soil and the cows, even though the soil and the rumen are the same, with these cows, we're stuffing those bellies full of stuff all day, every day. But what are we putting back on the soil? So in my opinion, you're gonna make things come alive in the soil with SR. We already know that, we've seen that. You're gonna provide a lot of a good balance of trace minerals in there. But I think we're gonna continue to see that you just can't not do anything else, because your soil's gotta have, I mean, we all know that it does better if you can keep it covered. We know there's tremendous value in cover crops and in green manure cropping and things like that. If you have the manure, you can cover enough acres. We know, you guys already know there's value in that. So any of those things you can do too. They just flat out need some carbon. They need some groceries. Redmond products aren't necessarily groceries for the microbes. They just stimulate everything to work. So in my opinion, as long as you can get, I've about come to the point though, if you can give them these kind of things, these stimuli like the humates and these minerals and things, if you can give that soil some kind of food, whether it's manure, whatever, if you have access to fish guts or, you know, people, there's all kinds of stuff, whatever, anything organic carbon like that, you'll go a long ways with that kind of an approach and actually building soil, not just trying to feed an engineered plant.
The reason I ask that is I'm big in South Dakota Soil Health Coalition and no-till and stuff like this. I went to a convention one time in this gal. It's like, we have plenty of phosphorus, we don't need phosphorus anymore. Alright, so I came home and told the co-op, stupid, we gotta put phosphorus on. Well, then I'm studying. Well, I'm not putting phosphorus here, well, I didn't. It may need to wean, but you gotta wean, you can't just cold turkey.
Right. And that's where I do like testing your soil just to kind of get an idea where you are, but you can see a lot visually too. But yeah, any of this stuff I would go at cautiously, but yeah, so my personal flavor is on the soil stuff, we always increase the plant quality, but we've held our own in every other aspect, but we've also learned you just, you know, like when you're doing corn, of course, you're probably still the highest yields and things like that, we still had nitrogen going in or whatever. You just, so I wouldn't try to eliminate that. I think it's kind of like what they say about the guys that go grass-fed. You kind of have to earn the right to do that. That means you got to put a lot of stuff in to get the quality in your forages to do that. Same thing with the field. It's going to take some time to build soil up. This is a similar chart to where a pretty astute organization come out with, you know, I'm guessing in their language it would be like Garden of Eden soil. Probably looks something like that. So when you put your soil test in, you guys don't need a specialist to tell you. If you got a soil test that looks like that, even just looking at the base saturation of those macros, you know, you got a pretty good soil going on right there. They didn't measure the hydrogen. If you have high hydrogen, that just means you're acidic. But in this soil, you've got a pH of 7, so I know that hydrogen number is going to be low. These kind of notes are over here too. But this is where it's like, okay, if you want to, SR is going to provide some traces, so I don't get too worried about down in here. But if you have something really out of whack there, address it, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. And there are, you guys already know, but whatever's in your area, there are things to address that with. You know, if you're low in calcium or phos, or, you know, there's stuff you can throw at it to try and balance it. But you guys can do that. That's nothing you have to be a specialist about. But I'm telling you, at our Redmond farm, the year, because we got a big turkey operation up there, the year I put down turkey compost versus MAP, monoammonium phosphate, 1152, it's just like, why did I even buy that stuff? I mean, you could see where I put the turkey. I didn't have to measure it. You could see it. The monoammonium phosphate was like, did it do anything? I don't know. So that's where I learned that. But this is just, these things are kind of cool. Just, you guys are smart enough to take those numbers right there and know what to do with it. If you need organic matter, put it. Organic matter is going to drive your exchange capacity and a couple other things. And one of the best things I ever did in my garden was just take some leftover old hay, just spread that all over. I know you can't do that on 7,000 acres, but I sure wish I could. That was the best thing I could have done for it. Till that stuff in. Anything else? Any other questions? Feel free to play with any of it. Experiment, see what works for you. Try different stuff. Did I miss anything else? Well, you guys made that pretty easy and quick.